Welcome to Chilling True Horror, where we delve into the eerie experiences that turn familiar spaces into sources of dread, stories shared by those who've lived with the unexplained right in their own homes. If a strange occurrence or haunting in your family residence has ever made you doubt your sanity or fear the walls around you, we'd love to hear about it. Just send your account to chillingtruehorror@gmail.com. It's in the description, and it could be featured in a future episode, connecting you with others who've felt that same unsettling presence. These aren't imagined frights. They're from real people who've confronted forces tied to their living spaces. Tonight, we're uncovering 3 true tales of haunted family homes, drawn from survivors who've battled entities that refuse to let go. If the thought of these possessions already has you glancing at your own surroundings, why not give this video a like to show solidarity with those who share, and subscribe to ensure you're alerted to every new exploration of the supernatural lurking nearby. Now, let's jump into our first story, one that reveals how the walls of a home can hold onto the past in ways that torment the present, based on accounts from those who've lived through it. It's titled, The Echoes in the Attic. This tale is drawn from a real account shared by a man named Daniel, names changed for privacy, who posted his family's experience in paranormal forums and local history groups after moving out of their childhood home in rural Pennsylvania in the early 2000s. Daniel was 12 at the time it all started, the middle kid in a family of 5, living in an old Victorian house that had been in his family for generations, passed down from his great-grandparents who built it back in the 1890s. The house stood on a quiet street lined with maple trees that turned fiery red in the fall, their leaves crunching underfoot like brittle bones as kids raked them into piles for jumping. The exterior was painted a faded gray with white trim that peeled in places from years of harsh winters, the wraparound porch creaking under the weight of rocking chairs where his mom would sit sipping iced tea on humid summer evenings. The air thick with the scent of blooming honeysuckle climbing the trellises. Inside, the house had that old wood smell, mixed with the faint mustiness of antique furniture and the aroma of his dad's pipe tobacco lingering in the den, where bookshelves sagged under volumes of history books and yellowed newspapers stacked in corners. Daniel's family was close-knit but struggling. His dad worked as a mechanic at the local garage, coming home with grease-stained hands and overalls smelling of oil and metal, his calluses rough when he ruffled Daniel's hair after a long day. His mom was a homemaker, baking apple pies in the kitchen where the oven door squeaked when opened, the cinnamon and butter scents wafting through the house like a warm embrace. While she homeschooled the kids around the big oak table scarred from years of homework and family meals, there were his older sister Katie, 14, and rebellious with her dyed hair tips and posters of rock bands taped to her bedroom walls, always blasting music from her boombox that vibrated the floorboards. His younger brother, Sam, 8, with a gap-toothed grin and a collection of toy cars, he raced across the hardwood floors, leaving scuff marks that Mom would sigh over but never really mind. And the baby of the family, little Emma, just 4, toddling around with her stuffed bear clutched tight, her laughter echoing like bells in the high-ceilinged rooms. The trouble began shortly after they discovered the attic during a spring cleaning, the kind where the whole family pitched in, dusting cobwebs from corners and sorting through boxes in the basement that smelled of mildew and forgotten memories. The attic access was a pull-down ladder in the upstairs hallway, hidden behind a door that stuck from disuse, the wood swollen from humidity. Dad had always said it was just storage, full of junk from previous owners, but that day, as the ladder creaked down with a puff of dust that made everyone cough, they decided to explore. The attic was a vast, dim space with slanted ceilings and exposed beams draped in spiderwebs that shimmered in the flashlight beams, the air stale and thick with the scent of old paper and mothballs. Boxes were stacked haphazardly, labeled in faded ink. Christmas decorations, Grandma's china, and the floorboards groaned under their weight as they stepped carefully, avoiding nails poking up like tiny traps. Katie found an old trunk first, its latch rusty and squeaking as she opened it, revealing yellowed letters tied with ribbon, antique clothes moth-eaten at the edges, and a small leather-bound journal that felt soft and worn in her hands. As they sifted through, Emma started whining, tugging at Mom's skirt. "It's cold up here, Mommy. I don't like it." The temperature had dropped noticeably, a chill that seeped into their bones despite the warm day outside, the kind of cold that made your breath visible in faint puffs under the single bare bulb dangling from a cord. Sam complained of a headache, rubbing his temples with grubby hands, while Daniel felt a prickle on the back of his neck, like someone watching from the shadows in the corners where the light didn't reach. Mom brushed it off as drafts from the eaves, but as they packed up, Katie pocketed the journal, curious about the elegant handwriting inside that spoke of echoes from the past and voices that won't be silenced. That night, as the family sat down for dinner in the kitchen, the table laden with Mom's pot roast steaming with carrots and potatoes, the aroma savory and comforting, strange things began. The lights flickered once, twice, the bulbs buzzing like angry bees before stabilizing, and from upstairs came a faint thump, like something falling in the attic. Dad joked about rats having a party, but his laugh was forced, his fork pausing midair as everyone exchanged uneasy glances. The disturbances escalated slowly, like a pot simmering before boiling over. That first week, Daniel woke in the middle of the night to whispers from the hallway, soft and indistinct, like a conversation just out of earshot, the words murmuring like wind through leaves but carrying a tone of urgency or argument. His room was at the end of the hall, with walls papered in blue stripes faded from sun, his bed creaking as he sat up, heart pounding in the darkness broken only by the glow of his nightlight shaped like a moon. He tiptoed to the door, the floor cold under his bare feet, pressing his ear against the wood that felt unnaturally warm. But the whispers stopped as suddenly as they started, leaving only the tick of the grandfather clock downstairs. The next morning, over breakfast of scrambled eggs and toast in the sunny kitchen, the butter melting golden on the plates, he mentioned it to the family. But Katie rolled her eyes. "You're imagining things, dork. Probably just the house settling." But that afternoon, while Mom was folding laundry in the living room, the scent of fresh detergent mixing with the polish from the wooden furniture, she heard laughter from the attic. Childlike giggles that echoed down the stairs, making her drop the stack of towels, her hands trembling as she called out, "Kids, is that you?" The house fell silent, but her face was pale when the family gathered for dinner that evening, the pot pie cooling on the table as she whispered, "It sounded like a little girl, but Emma was outside playing." As days turned to weeks, the hauntings intensified, weaving into their daily lives like an unwelcome guest who refused to leave. Sam started having nightmares, waking screaming about the lady in the attic, who whispered secrets in his ear, his small body soaked in sweat under the blankets patterned with superheroes. Mom would rush in, flipping on the lamp that cast a warm glow on his tear-streaked face, holding him close as his sobs shook his frame, the room smelling of his favorite bubble bath from earlier. Katie, who had been reading the journal in secret under her covers with a flashlight, confessed one night during a family meeting in the living room, the TV muted, showing a sitcom no one was watching, that the book belonged to a girl named Eliza who lived in the house in the 1920s. The entries spoke of echoes from a tragic accident, Eliza's little sister falling down the attic stairs during a game of hide-and-seek, her neck snapping on the way down, the family covering it up out of shame, burying her in the backyard under what was now the rose bush that bloomed blood-red every spring. "She writes about hearing her sister's voice calling her to play," Katie said, her voice quavering as she read aloud by the light of the floor lamp, the pages yellowed and brittle under her fingers. The family tried to rationalize. Old houses creak, kids have imaginations, but the activity ramped up. Objects moved. Dad's tools in the garage rearranged overnight, the metal clanging when he opened the door in the morning, the air cold despite the heater running. Mom's jewelry box in the bedroom would open on its own. A locket with a photo of her own sister who died young, tumbling out onto the dresser with a soft thud, the chain tangled like it had been played with. Emma began talking to an imaginary friend named Lily, Eliza's sister's name from the journal, describing her as sad and cold, drawing pictures of a girl with long hair standing in the attic, her crayons scratching across paper at the kitchen table while Mom cooked. The smell of frying onions unable to mask the growing dread. Daniel felt it most at night, lying in bed with the covers pulled tight, the moonlight slanting through curtains to cast bars on the floor, hearing footsteps pacing in the attic above, slow and deliberate, like someone searching for something lost. The climax came during a stormy night in late fall. The wind howling outside like mournful cries, rain lashing the windows in sheets that blurred the view of the swaying trees. The power flickered out, plunging the house into darkness broken only by flashes of lightning that illuminated the rooms in stark white bursts. The family gathered in the living room with candles, their flames dancing erratically on the coffee table, casting shadows that leaped like living things on the walls. From the attic came banging, loud thumps that shook the ceiling, dust sifting down like snow, followed by a child's voice calling, "Come play, come find me." Emma's eyes lit up. It's Lily. She wants to play hide and seek. Terror gripped the family. Dad grabbed a flashlight, its beam trembling as he led them up the stairs, the wood creaking under their weight, the air growing colder with each step, their breaths visible in puffs. The attic door, usually stuck, swung open on its own with a groan, revealing the space in chaos. Boxes overturned, papers scattered, the journal open on the floor, to a page reading, "She's here, she won't leave without me." In the center, illuminated by lightning, stood a translucent figure of a little girl in a vintage dress, her hair in braids, her eyes hollow and sad, reaching out with pale hands that passed through the air like smoke. "Play with me," she whispered, her voice echoing unnaturally, the temperature dropping so low frost formed on the windows. Mom screamed, grabbing Emma as the girl lunged forward, her form flickering like a bad signal. Dad, in panic, shouted prayers from his Catholic upbringing, his voice breaking as he clutched a cross from his pocket, the metal cold in his palm. The entity recoiled, the attic shaking as if in anger, beams groaning like they might collapse. They fled downstairs, barricading in the living room until dawn, the storm raging outside mirroring the chaos within. The family called a local priest the next day, a kindly man in his 60s, with a gentle voice and a bag of holy water that sloshed as he walked through the house, blessing each room with sprinkles that sizzled on contact in the attic. He researched the history. Eliza and her sister Lily had indeed lived there, Lily dying in a fall covered up to avoid scandal, her spirit trapped in grief. A full exorcism followed, the priest chanting in Latin as the family held hands in the attic, the air thick with incense that burned their eyes, the entity manifesting as wind-whipping papers, and a child's cry fading into silence. Peace returned slowly. The house warmed, the whispers stopped. But the family moved out months later, unable to shake the memories. Daniel, now an adult, shared, "Homes hold on to pain. If yours whispers, listen, and leave." The experience left them with a fear of attics, always checking locks, the sound of creaking floors triggering panic. If the persistent echoes in this family's home have you listening closer to your own creaks and whispers, why not comment the one sound or sign in your house that makes you wonder if you're truly alone? Your alertness could be what keeps the past at bay. Now, let's continue to our second story, one that uncovers how the history embedded in a home's foundation can resurface to torment the living, drawn from those who've endured the unrelenting grip of the past. It's titled, "The Basement That Breathed." This account is based on the real experiences of a family from Massachusetts who shared their ordeal in local paranormal investigation reports and online survivor groups after fleeing their home in the mid-2010s, when unexplained events turned their sanctuary into a source of constant dread. The family consisted of parents Mark and Lisa, both in their late 30s at the time, and their 3 children, teenager Alex, 15 with a passion for video games that kept him glued to his console in the family room late into the night, 12-year-old Sophie, who loved drawing in her sketchbook at the kitchen table, her pencils scratching across paper with the scent of graphite mixing with dinner aromas, and little Ben, 8, always building forts from blankets and cushions in the living room, his laughter filling the space like a balm against the world's worries. They had moved into the house, a charming Cape Cod style built in the 1920s, after Mark got a promotion at his engineering job, the kind of place with a white picket fence enclosing a yard where tulips bloomed bright red in spring, and a driveway crunching under tires as they pulled in after work. The exterior was clapboard siding painted a soft blue, with black shutters framing windows that let in sunlight streaming through lace curtains, casting patterns on the hardwood floors polished to a shine. The house felt like a dream at first, bought at a bargain because it had sat on the market for months, the realtor mentioning some history, but brushing it off as old rumors in a town full of them. Inside, the layout was cozy. A front hall with a coat rack cluttered with jackets and scarves smelling of fresh laundry, leading to a living room with a brick fireplace where they'd roast marshmallows on chilly evenings. The wood crackling and popping with warmth. A kitchen with granite counters where Lisa baked chocolate chip cookies. The oven's heat filling the air with sweet vanilla and melting chocolate that made the kids rush in from outside. And upstairs bedrooms with slanted ceilings where the rain pattered softly on the roof during storms, lulling them to sleep. But the basement was the oddity, a steep set of wooden stairs descending from the kitchen, creaking underfoot like complaints, leading to a concrete-floored space with low ceilings and exposed pipes that dripped occasionally, the air always damp and musty with the faint smell of earth and mildew, like a forgotten cellar. They used it for storage at first, boxes of holiday decorations stacked against the walls, old furniture covered in dust sheets that billowed like ghosts when the door opened, and a washing machine that rumbled like thunder during cycles. The first signs were subtle, dismissed as the quirks of an old house settling into its bones. It started shortly after they moved in, during a hot summer when the air conditioner hummed constantly, struggling against the humidity that made clothes stick to skin. Mark was down there one afternoon, sorting through boxes to find his toolbox, the light from a single bulb swinging overhead, casting swinging shadows on the gray walls pocked with cracks like veins. He felt a draft, cold and unexpected in the stifling heat, brushing against his neck like icy fingers, raising goosebumps on his arms despite the sweat beading on his forehead. "Must be a vent," he muttered to himself, his voice echoing oddly in the space. But as he turned to leave, he heard a soft breath, inhale, exhale, coming from the far corner where the shadows pooled deepest, behind a stack of old trunks left by the previous owners. His heart skipped, but he shook it off, climbing the stairs with the toolbox clanking against his leg, the door slamming shut behind him with a force that rattled the frame. That night, over dinner in the kitchen, the table set with plates of grilled chicken and corn on the cob, the butter melting golden and the steam rising with the scent of herbs, Mark mentioned it casually, laughing it off as the house breathing. The kids giggled, Sophie drawing a cartoon of a house with lungs on her napkin, her crayon scratching brightly, but Lisa felt a twinge of unease, her fork pausing mid-air as she glanced at the basement door. Solid oak with a brass knob that suddenly seemed too flimsy. The disturbances grew from there. A few days later, Sophie went down to grab laundry from the dryer, the machine cycle ending with a beep that echoed up the stairs. The basement was cooler than usual, the air heavy like before a storm, and as she loaded the warm clothes into a basket, their fabric soft and smelling of detergent, she heard the breathing again, slow, rhythmic, like someone asleep in the corner. The sound wet and labored, as if through congested lungs. Her skin prickled, and she dropped the basket, clothes spilling out onto the cold concrete floor, scrambling up the stairs 2 at a time, her heart pounding in her ears like drums. "There's someone down there," she gasped to her mom in the kitchen, where Lisa was chopping vegetables, the knife thudding on the cutting board. The family searched together that evening, flashlights in hand, the beams cutting through the gloom like knives, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, and cobwebs draping from the rafters like veils. They found nothing. No intruders, no animals, just the usual clutter and the faint drip of a pipe in the distance. But as they turned to leave, Ben pointed to the wall. "Look, it's moving." In the flashlight's glow, the concrete seemed to pulse slightly, like a chest rising and falling with breath, the cracks widening and narrowing in rhythm. Mark laughed nervously. Just an illusion from the light. But his voice wavered, and they hurried upstairs, slamming the door and pushing a chair against it for good measure, the wood scraping on the tile floor. As weeks passed, the basement's breathing became a constant presence, infiltrating their daily lives like an unwelcome relative who wouldn't leave. It was loudest at night, when the house fell quiet, the family in their beds upstairs, the parents' room with a 4-poster bed creaking under their weight, Alex's filled with the glow of his game console screen, Sophie's with sketchbooks scattered on the desk, and Ben's with stuffed animals lined up like guardians. The sound would start as a low rumble, vibrating through the floors like a distant train, then turn to distinct inhales and exhales, wet and raspy, as if the house itself was alive and struggling for air. Lisa would lie awake, staring at the ceiling fan, whirring lazily, her hand clutching Mark's under the sheets, whispering, "Do you hear it?" He'd nod, his face pale in the moonlight slanting through blinds, the room cold despite the heater running. The kids started sleeping with lights on, Ben crawling into Sophie's bed some nights, his small body trembling as they huddled together, the breathing seeming to call their names in the sighs. Ben. Sophie. Faint but unmistakable. They researched the house's history at the local library, a quiet building with rows of books smelling of paper and dust. The librarian, an older woman with glasses perched on her nose, who helped them dig through old records on microfiche that whirred under the reader. The house had a dark past. In the 1930s, during the Depression, a family of coal miners lived there, the father succumbing to black lung disease in the basement after years of coughing up black phlegm. His breaths labored and wet until he died alone down there, his wife finding him slumped against the wall, eyes staring vacant at the ceiling. The family covered it up, burying him in the backyard to avoid scandal, the spot now under the swing set where the kids played, the chains creaking like his final gasps. Armed with this, they called a paranormal investigator, a middle-aged man named Mr. Harlan with equipment in a duffel bag that clinked as he set up EVP recorders and thermal cameras in the basement. The air even colder now, their breaths visible as they stood in a circle. The investigation that night was tense. The family huddled upstairs in the living room with blankets, the TV on low showing a comedy no one laughed at, while Harlan worked below. Hours later, he emerged pale, playing back recordings. Over the static, a voice rasped, "Can't breathe," followed by wet coughs that echoed like they were in the room. The thermal camera showed a cold spot in the corner, shaped like a man slumped against the wall, pulsing with each breath. "It's residual," Harlan explained over coffee in the kitchen, the pot gurgling as it brewed, the aroma strong but unable to mask the fear. The energy stuck, replaying his death. "But it's getting stronger, feeding off your fear." The family held a cleansing the next day, a priest from the local church sprinkling holy water that sizzled on the basement floor, his Latin prayers echoing off the walls as incense smoke curled thick and acrid, making their eyes water. They dug up the backyard under the swing set, finding bone fragments wrapped in decayed cloth, the earth soft and loamy under shovels that clanged against rocks. Reburying them in the cemetery with a proper service, the priest blessing the grave as wind rustled the leaves overhead, brought peace. The breathing stopped, the house warmed. But the family moved soon after, unable to forget. Daniel, now an adult, shared, "Homes remember suffering. If yours sighs, it's time to listen, and leave." The experience left them with a fear of basements, always leaving lights on, the sound of heavy breathing triggering panic. If the persistent breaths in this family's basement have you tuning into your own home's sounds with new suspicion, why not comment the one noise in your house that makes you pause and wonder? Your alertness could be what silences the echoes for good. Now, let's finish with our third and final story. One that will make you question if the house you grew up in still remembers every tear you ever cried in it. It's titled, "The House That Fed on Our Pain." This is a real account from a family in southern Brazil, shared by the eldest daughter, I'll call her Fernanda, in a long, emotional thread on a private Facebook group for survivors of haunted houses. The events took place between 2011 and 2014 in a 2-story colonial house in the interior of Rio Grande do Sul. The house was beautiful on the outside. White walls, blue window frames, a huge fig tree in the front yard that gave shade in summer and dropped purple fruit that stained the sidewalk. Inside, however, it always felt hungry. My parents bought it cheap because the previous owner, an old widow, had hanged herself in the laundry room. Everyone in the neighborhood knew, but the realtor said it was just sadness, nothing supernatural. We moved in when I was 15. My sister Luana was 12, and our little brother Gabriel was 6. From the very first week, the house started feeding. It began with small things. My mother would cry in the kitchen for no reason, saying she felt an immense weight on her chest. My father, who had never been violent, began to have outbursts of rage, screaming at us over nothing and then crying like a child, saying, "Something is squeezing my heart." Luana started cutting herself in the bathroom, hiding the scars under long sleeves even in the heat of summer. And Gabriel stopped talking. From one week to the next, he simply stopped speaking. He spent hours staring at the walls with a smile that wasn't his. At night, we heard footsteps walking slowly through the hallway, always stopping in front of each bedroom door as if choosing. The temperature dropped so much that frost formed inside the windows even in summer, the mirrors fogged up with handprints that weren't ours. And the worst, every time someone in the family cried, laughed too loud, or screamed during a fight, the house seemed to swell. The walls creaked, the floorboards vibrated, and we felt a kind of suction, as if the house was inhaling our emotions. My mother began to waste away. She, who was always plump and loved to cook, lost almost 30 kilos in 6 months. Her eyes sank, her skin turned gray, and she started talking to someone we couldn't see. She would sit in the living room for hours, whispering, "Yes, I understand. I'll give more," while smiling at the empty armchair. One night I woke up to find Luana standing in the hallway, completely naked, with her arms open, staring at the ceiling. When I touched her, she was ice cold and said in a voice that wasn't hers, "She likes when we suffer. She gets stronger." I pulled her back to bed and she didn't remember anything the next day. The turning point came when Gabriel, at only 7 years old, tried to hang himself with my father's belt in the laundry room, the same place the widow had killed herself. We found him in time, but he spent a week in the hospital. When he woke up, he finally spoke again. The first words out of his mouth were, "The lady in the wall says if I don't go with her, she'll take Mommy instead." That was when my parents believed. We called a priest. He came, saw the house, and left the same day saying he had never felt such evil in 40 years of ministry. He returned with 2 more priests and a medium from the region. They did a deliverance that lasted almost 8 hours. The things that happened that night I will never forget. The walls bled a black, viscous liquid that smelled of rot. The temperature dropped to the point where our breath was visible. Objects flew. My mother levitated almost a meter off the ground, while speaking in a male voice, cursing in German. She never learned German in her life. And from the walls came a scream that wasn't human, a scream of rage at being expelled. When everything ended, the medium, completely exhausted, told us, "This house doesn't just have a spirit, it has a hunger. The widow who killed herself here didn't die alone." She made a pact. Every tear shed here, every pain, every despair feeds it, and it won't stop until it consumes an entire family. We left the next day. We left everything behind: furniture, clothes, photos. We only took documents and the clothes on our backs. The house was demolished 2 years later. They said the machines broke down several times, as if something didn't want to be destroyed. Today there is an apartment building in its place. But until today, 10 years later, my mother wakes up crying at night without knowing why. My sister still has the scars on her arms. And Gabriel never spoke again after that night in the hospital. He is 19 years old now and communicates only by writing. The house won. If the suffocating weight of this family's suffering inside their own home has you feeling watched by your own walls right now, drop in the comments the one thing in your house that has always scared you. Your confession could be the warning that saves the next family who moves in. As we close the door on these 3 haunting tales of family homes turned prisons of the past, where echoes in the attic called children to play forever, where a basement breathed the final gasps of a forgotten death, and where an entire house fed on the pain of the living like a parasite, we're left with the chilling truth that some walls don't just witness suffering, they remember it, they store it. And when the conditions are right, they give them more. If these stories have made you hear your own house a little differently tonight, the creak of a floorboard, the sigh of old pipes, the way the air sometimes feels heavier in certain rooms, then drop in the comments the one thing in your home that has always scared you, even if you never told yourself it was nothing. Your comment might be the warning that saves the next person who moves into a house that is still hungry. And if the weight of these real accounts has left you unsettled in the best way, show it with a like, subscribe, and turn on that bell. We drop a new video every single day, always real stories, always told without filters. Have your own haunted house story that still keeps you from going into certain rooms alone? Send it to chillingtruehorror@gmail.com. Your story could be the next one we tell. Stay safe in your homes tonight. And if you hear breathing that isn't yours, don't answer. We'll see you tomorrow for more true horror.